Hi everyone, my name is Lavanya.
And I'm Melissa, and in this session we will be assembling our basic PieBot.
All the components you need for this video are laid out right here on this table. Let's take a closer look.
Please bring your attention to the 3 screws that I have laid out here. The first type is a 3/8 flat-headed, a 3/8 pan-headed, and a 1/2 inch pan-headed. It is important you recognize the different types as we will be using all the screws in our assembly. I recommend having a pair of needle nose pliers to help you tighten your screws. However, if you don't have these handy, you'll be just fine. For our first step, we need to identify the top side of our chassis. This can be done by finding the countersunk holes, which are here, 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 and here. Countersunk meaning it is indented into our chassis. And the first thing I want to do is grab my mini breadboard, which may come in varying colors. I'm going to peel off the sticker and making sure my chassis is facing up, I'm going to place it on the bottom right-hand side. Just like this. Now, let's take the gearbox, and to assemble this, we are going to use the underside or the back side of the chassis. I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to make sure my gearbox holes line up with the holes right here. Please notice that the motors are facing downward. You want to make sure that you don't build your PieBot upside down. Once I have those holes lined up, I'm going to go ahead and take 2 flathead screws and 2 nuts. I'm going to take 1 flat-headed screw and put it into a countersunk hole on the other side. Since this screw is flat-headed, it will flush with the side of the chassis. I'm going to take 1 nut, place it right onto the screw. Once I have that in place, I'll take my screwdriver and start screwing it in. This part can be a little bit tricky, and those of you with small fingers will have an easier time. Keep unscrewing. And you don't want to tighten it all the way until you've done the other side, right here. So I'm going to go ahead and take 1 more flat-headed screw, and again, place it into the countersunk hole. I'll take my nut, place it onto the screw, and then once again, screw it in from the other side. And now that I'm doing the second side, I can screw it in all the way. If you have some needle nose pliers, you can hold the nut as you screw. And this will ensure you have a tight fit. And I'll tighten this side. And that connects your gearbox to your chassis. We now want to route our motor wires through this hole right here. When working with these wires, please be very careful with your 4 soldered points, as they are very fragile. I'm going to take my wires and gently route them through this hole right here, 1 at a time. And I'm gently going to run my other wires through. And for now, we're going to leave our wires hanging out here. We will begin wiring in another video. Now that we've routed our wires, the next step is to take our switch and the baggie that it comes with, which contains 4 pieces, 2 nuts and 2 washers. Watch carefully as I place these pieces onto the switch. First, I want to put a nut, spin it on all the way down, and then I want to take my flat washer. Notice there's a little hook on the end of it. Make sure this hook is facing down when you place your washer. You can wiggle it around until you find a good spot and place it all the way down. Now we are going to take our switch and put it through one of the holes in our chassis. When you're placing your switch into the hole, notice that you have an empty terminal right here. This empty terminal should be closest to the axle in your gearbox. So let's go ahead and place it in. Here's my axle of the gearbox. Here's the axle of the gearbox and the large hole we want to place the switch in. Just like that. Turn it over, and now I want to put my washer with bumps facing upward on top of the switch. And finally, take my last nut, put it on, and give it a couple of turns until it's screwed on tight. Now, you'll notice this switch is able to toggle off and on. It is on when it's facing towards the empty terminal, just like that. It is off when it's facing away from the empty terminal. The last part for the switch is we need to connect our two tabs right here. Take 2 1/2-inch pan-headed screws and place them into the tab, like that. I'm going to take the wire gently, wrap it around, and place it through the hole right here. Once I've done that, I will tighten and secure this screw with a nut on the other side. And tighten the screw all the way down. Give it a couple turns, and again, if you have some needle nose pliers, you can do this to tighten. And I will replicate that for the other tab. And that completes assembling your switch. Now I'm going to pass it over to Melissa, who will show you how to assemble the caster wheel.
The first thing that you'll want to do is arrange the components for your caster assembly. Let's have a look. Here are all the components you will need for your caster assembly. Most of these will be in your caster baggie, but you will also have your caster plate, 2 3/4-inch nylon spacers, and 4 of your 1/2-inch screws. The first step will be to insert your 1/2-inch steel ball into your caster housing. Caster itself simply means a free spinning wheel. Next, we will use the thick spacer plate to make our pivot level. We won't use the thin spacer plate, and so we can put that aside. Once we've lined up our holes, you can insert one of your small screws into our housing and then our thick spacer plate. You might need to use your screwdriver to help it go fully inside. Next, we'll add on our caster plate. Finally, we will add our nuts to secure the caster housing. When secure, the next part will be adding on your spacers. To add our spacers, we'll first insert our screw and then simply spin our spacer on. And we can use our screwdriver to tighten. We'll add on our other Here's another screw. These are our 3/8 inch screws. And again, to tighten, we'll hold the spacer and tighten the screwdriver. Now we're ready to add our caster assembly onto our chassis. To do this, be careful not to put too much pressure on our motor wires, as we know those solder points are fragile. Insert your screw, align your hole, and you can gently turn that into place. Align your second hole, and we can use our screwdriver to put it into place. We're just about ready to add our stem board to our chassis. But first, we want to add our nylon spacers, which will be used to attach our light sensor. Although we're not attaching our light sensor yet, the light sensor will be added using these flat screws, which will be covered by our stem board. Let's take a look. These are the countersunk holes that we will be using. Align your spacer with your hole, insert your screw, and then you can just turn your spacer into position. And we'll use the screwdriver to tighten. And we'll repeat for the other side. Here are the components you will need to add your stem board onto your PieBot chassis. The first thing we want to do is mount our stem board using our plastic mount. When you place it in the center, if it's not snug and flush on the surface, spin it around until it is. It only fits one way. You will use the 3/8 inch screws and your 440 nuts to mount. Both your stem board and your mounting plate are fragile, so be careful to not over tighten at any time. After you're done one, we can move on to the second. You'll notice I'm not tightening any of these. Once aligned, we'll tighten all four at the same time. To tighten, I'll hold the bottom of the nuts and use my screwdriver. We want to be very gentle and not over tighten our stem board. Once all four screws are tightened, we're ready to mount. We'll use our 4 outer holes and our 1/2 inch screws. First, we can insert our screws and then add in our 1 inch spacers, which we can simply spin right on. To tighten, I'll hold each in place and use my screwdriver. Being careful not to over tighten. We're now ready to mount onto our chassis. I'll now pass this over to Lavanya to complete assembly of our basic PieBot.
The first thing we need to grab is our battery rails, which look like this.
We have 2 types of rails, one with a larger width and one with a smaller width. We want to place the one with the smaller width on the bottom and the larger width on the top. This creates an overhang in which we will be using our battery to slide in and out. Now that we have these lined up, let's line them up on the chassis. I'm going to line these holes up with the holes right here and here. Once I've placed them down, I will take 2 1/2-inch screws and put them in like that. And let me do the other side. And Melissa can give me a hand to line it up. And once I've done that, we'll place the stem board right on top. I'm going to give it a couple of turns so that I can align the pieces. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. Take my 2 rails, put the smaller width below and the larger width on top. And I'll line them up with the holes on the other side of my stem board. Place this in the holes right here and line them up. And I'm going to take 2 1/2-inch screws and put them in, just like that. Do a couple of turns so it doesn't fall, and I'll do that for the other side. Once I have all the screws in place, I'm going to turn it around and tighten all the screws. You don't want to tighten them too much, as we will be sliding the battery pack in. Now you'll notice I've created a nice overhang, and I'll take my battery pack plate and I can slide it in and out. Now that we have that set up, locate your 2 Velcro buttons, these ones, and I'm going to place one in the middle of my plate. I'll take my battery pack, and I'm going to take my other Velcro button and put it in the middle as well. You'll need 3 AA batteries to put them in to the pack. This will be our power supply. I want you to face the wires so they're facing towards the inside of the chassis. Put this on my plate, just like that. And now I can nicely slide my battery pack in through the slot, just like that. The last part is to take our battery pack wires and connect them to our terminal screws. Place it right here, and I will hold it down by using a nut to keep it in place and all the way. Now locate this piece in your kit. It is a red wire with a male end and a tab. We'll connect this tab to our other screw terminal right here. And the same way we connected our last tab, we'll take a nut and screw it on tight. With that, the very last part of assembling this PieBot is to put on the tires. Here are my 2 tires, which we assembled in another video. When you put them onto the axles, give it a little push, but make sure your tires don't touch the chassis so they're able to freely spin. I'll do the other side. Remember to give it a little push onto the axle and have enough clearance between your chassis and your wheel. That completes the basic PieBot assembly. We will be going over wiring in another video. Thank you.
Congratulations.